For those of you who don't know, my name is Chad Lassiter, and I am lucky enough to get to come here and speak with you this morning. And before I get into it, I got a confession to make. This is a pretty surreal moment for me. When Chris first asked me if I wanted to speak, I really wasn't quite sure. And not because I didn't want to be here with you this morning, or not because I didn't want to come and hang out, but because I'm afraid of being vulnerable, and I realize that a lot of you don't know that much about me. And I really didn't feel deserving enough to be up here, in God's eyes mostly. But around the time that he asked me, I was leading a small group of men through a Bible study called Experiencing God. And at that moment, we were talking about spiritual markers and saying yes to God's invitation. Tell me that he doesn't have a sense of humor, right? Yeah. And I couldn't exactly ignore this sign from God and look those men in the eye and tell them to say yes to God's invitation. And so I realized that after talking about it and praying about it, that if I truly want to be effective as a leader, or if I truly want people to relate to me, then at some point I've got to do something slightly uncomfortable and open up. So that's what I'm here to do today. I'm here answering a call from God. And I'm going to tell you a story. And I'm going to tell you a story about me. I'm going to tell you a story about hope and how God can use anyone to serve in his kingdom, no matter what we've done, no matter where we've come from. And I'm going to tie it into a story of a man in the Bible by the name of Gideon, and how Gideon had to come to a decision in his life when God laid a call on his life. So if you don't mind, let's pray, and we're going to dive in. Dear Heavenly Father, I'm so thankful that you're in this place today. I'm so thankful that you brought all these people here and kept them safe through travels during the holidays. Dear Heavenly Father, I invite you into this place. I invite you into our hearts and into our ears, and help keep it open, and just for you to hear, or for them to hear what you have to say. In your name we pray, amen. So I grew up your typical all-American kid in your all-American small-town USA. I grew up playing sports. I played football, basketball, baseball, and I ran track. I'm going to clarify the baseball part real quick. I really appreciate baseball. I like it a lot. I think it's an awesome art. But when I got older, that ball started getting faster. And a ball coming 70, 90 miles an hour at me did not feel very comforting. And so I chose to focus on other things. I also grew up outdoors, and I grew up hunting, and I still enjoy that to this day. I enjoy camping and hiking and kayaking, and I enjoy anything that has a sense of adventure to it or a sense of thrill. So on my honeymoon, my wife talked me into skydiving, and I was absolutely terrified to do it. But a part of me just had to see what all the fuss was about, and so I did it, luckily. I have two wonderful parents, and I appreciate the relationship that we have now, because it always wasn't that way. And I'm very lucky that God blessed Bobby and Mamie to be my parents, and I really appreciate them now. The older I get, the more I see how much they really struggled and sacrificed to help me and my brothers. I am the oldest, so I have two younger brothers. One is 28, his name is Zach, and the other one is 15, and his name is Seth. I try harder to be a better big brother to Seth, because I was real mean to Zach growing up. Me and Zach are only 3 years apart, and it was that typical, like, I have my friends, you have your friends, like, go away, you're annoying, all that typical big brother, little brother stuff. And I really missed out on a lot of him growing up doing that. And so I really try hard to be a better big brother to Seth, in hopes to get it halfway right and to make up for some of those mistakes. I work for Glenn County as an athletic coordinator. I know, what is that? My job basically just gets to plan sports for kids all day. So if your kids sign up for basketball, football, soccer, t-ball, what have you, it's my job to plan it and coordinate it and put it together. I really can't believe they pay me for it, to be honest with you, because I don't feel like it's an adult job, but nevertheless, here we are. I also was, by the grace of God, lucky enough to marry JC. And JC is without a doubt the second best thing to ever happen in my life. And I don't know where we're going to go, or I don't know what God has planned for us, but I do know that there's no one else that I'd rather go through this life with. I love you. Aww. Comedic relief is always a plus. I also grew up in the church. Now, when I say that I grew up in the church, I don't just mean that I went when the doors were open. I mean, I went and participated. So if we had a program, if we had an event, I was there. If we were going on a camp or going to a retreat, I was going. I was a leader in my youth group growing up. And so much so that at the age of 16, I felt a call to go into the ministry. And I really didn't know what that call was, but I had a real close relationship with my youth pastor. He kind of helped me navigate through those waters a little bit. So much so that we had a youth day one Sunday, and it's where our youth band was supposed to play, our youth choir was supposed to sing, we were supposed to pass out the offering plates, like we were supposed to run the show. And my youth pastor asked me if I would speak. I was like, wait a minute. Like, this is the Sunday service, the adult congregation. Surely you don't want me to speak. He's like, yeah, I want you to do it. And so I did. And I can remember being as nervous then as I am now. So when I tell you this moment is really surreal for me, I mean it. An interesting fact about me is I struggle really bad with self-doubt. And I struggle really bad with feeling good enough. And I struggle really bad with feeling deserving enough for anything good in this world. I have this image of myself that I know isn't true, but yet I still battle with that every day. And it's really hard for me because I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's something happened in my childhood that I block out, or I don't know if it's as I got older, it's just some anxiety, but it's a struggle. Some days I can be the most confident man in the room, and there's other days that I don't even want to go in the room. And there's a man in the Bible that fought those same fears. His name was Gideon. I want to set the scene for Gideon real quick. Gideon is your typical guy. He's your average Joe Schmo, nothing too special to the human eye about Gideon. He's a hard worker. He does what he's told, but yet he battles with self-doubt. And he has this image of himself that he is weak and that he is the least and he's not deserving, and he has all these self-esteem issues. And he's also afraid. And he's afraid of the Midianites. And the Midianites are this group of people who have come into Israel and are just plundering the city. They're going from town to town. They're taking what they want. They're doing what they want. And really nobody can stop them, or nobody even has the nerve to stop them. They have those people so scared to even come outside. And that's where we're going to meet Gideon. Gideon is thrashing wheat in a wine press. And if you know anything about thrashing wheat, he's basically taking the parts of the grain that are edible and discarding the rest. So separating what you can eat versus what you can't eat. And you need a lot of room to do this. Like, you need an open area. And Gideon is doing it in this small wine press room because he's so scared to go outside for the Midianites. So let's meet Gideon there. If you have your Bibles with you, I encourage you to open up to Judges chapter 6, and we're going to start in verse 11. So Judges is in the Old Testament. It's 6 or 7 chapters to the right. It's before Ruth. If you hit Ruth, you've gone too far. All right? So don't hit Ruth. We're going to be in Judges chapter 6, and we're going to start in verse 11. All right? And we're just going to read a few verses down. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Josiah the Azabite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." And Gideon said to him, "Please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt?' But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian." And the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you?" And he said to him, "Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." And the Lord said to him, "But I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man." And he said to him, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me. Please do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present and set it before you." And he said, "I will stay until you return." So let's unpack this here a little bit. One, Gideon is just a man. But Gideon knows who God is. He has history with God. He knows that God's been at work, and he's heard about it. Matter of fact, he even says in the text, he's like, "Where are all the promises that you told our forefathers you can bring us up out of Egypt? If you're really with us, then why is all this happening?" All right? So Gideon knows who God is. Number 2, he receives a call from God. All right? An angel of the Lord comes to Gideon and says, "Hey, God has plans for you to save Israel." And here is Gideon, this self-doubting, had this image of himself guy. He's like, "Wait, are you sure? Me? I'm the weakest in my clan. I'm the least in my father's house. Surely there's someone else who can save Israel from Gideon, or save Gideon from Israel." I imagine this being like a coach and a team, right? Like, you're getting ready for the big game, and here's Gideon on the team. Like, Gideon has some skills. He can play. He's your average guy. But then there's this stud, right? There's this guy that everyone knows can go into that game and dominate and lead the team to victory. And the coach is like, "All right, Gideon, I want you to go save Israel." I'm like, huh? Like, do you see me? And do you see him? Like, this guy surely is better suited for this task. And God says, "No, Gideon, I want you to do it." And that's what's happening to Gideon right now. The third thing is that Gideon questions God. Gideon knows who God is. He knows what he's capable of. He's seen him at work. But yet he still questions, are you sure? Me. I bet many of us have been in that same situation. I bet many of us have seen God at work. We know what God can do. He's done it for us either firsthand or for loved ones. And yet we still have the nerve to ask him, are you sure? Gideon's story really resonates with me because it is me. I told y'all earlier that I was a leader in my youth group growing up, and around 16 or so, I was really on fire for God, and I felt this call to go into ministry, but I really didn't know how to navigate through that. And my youth pastor, who had a close relationship, helped me see that. Well, it turns out my youth pastor let me down in a pretty big way. Some situations arose where he lacked integrity, and he even tried to pin me against my own father in some situations. And it affected me more than I realized at the time. And my trust was broken. I remember thinking, if this is how men of God are going to be, if this is how this Christian way is supposed to go, then I want nothing to do with it. And so I rebelled. And I quit. I quit church. I quit God. I quit everything that I had known. And for the next 10 or 12 years or so, my life would take a dramatic turn. I started drinking, and I started using drugs, and I started hanging out with people that I knew weren't really my friends, but I just wanted to run away from everything that I had ever known, including church, including God, and including some family. And as drinking and the drugs usually start, it starts every now and then, or on the weekends, and then the older you get, it turns into more and more. And the older I get, the more it turns into every day. And by the time I'm 22, I can't function without it. Matter of fact, from the age of 22 until 28, I can count on one hand how many days that I didn't use or didn't drink. So here is this 16-year-old all-American kid, grew up in the church, had the friends, the whole 9 yards, and now I'm in my 20s and I'm an alcoholic. I've got a drinking problem, and my life is an absolute mess. I battled depression for the longest time. I battled those demons of, you're not worthy enough unless you have this alcohol. No one's going to accept you unless you have this alcohol, unless you do these things. This is what truly will bring you happiness. And I believed it. And I believed that lie. And I used the alcohol and all the other things to cover up my feelings and to cover up things that I have done and to hide from who I was. I can remember the lowest point came in my life on December 17th, 2016. I was living in Memphis, Tennessee at the time, and I was sitting on the couch in my apartment, and I remember thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm not talking about that I didn't want to drink anymore. I'm talking about I didn't want to live anymore. I was done. And if my dad did not pick up the phone that night, I don't think that I would be here with you speaking this morning. By the grace of God, I made it through that night, and I stumbled around the next 6 days or so, and I was going home that following week because it was Christmas. And I was going home to see my family. Well, it turns out that was going to be the most impactful Christmas of my life. Christmas Day came, and we did the whole open gifts. We watched the movies. We ate. We really enjoyed each other's company. But I started to feel really sick, and I started just to feel this pain, and I couldn't shake it or I couldn't sleep it off. So Christmas night, my mom takes me to the ER. And the doctor says, hey, we're going to run some tests. I'm like, all right, whatever you got to do to make this pain go away. Well, he comes back. He proceeds to tell me that it's acute pancreatitis. And that can be caused by two things. One, a really bad diet. I ate okay. The second thing was heavy alcohol abuse. Me and my mom kind of looked at each other because we knew which one it was. And then he proceeded to tell me that your pancreas has these lipase levels that fluctuate between 25 and 75. And mine checked in at over 1,400. And they didn't know if they were going to bring it back down or not, to where I could leave. I was like, wait a minute. And so he proceeded to tell me that if you keep living the lifestyle you're living, you're not going to make it. This is going to kill you. And I can remember being in that hospital bed, and Seth, who's 12 at the time, is laying there with me just crying. I couldn't just believe that this is where my life had gotten me to. That all the decisions, things that I had made had led me to this point. I couldn't shake it. I spent 5 days in that hospital before they got my levels back down to an area where they felt comfortable for me to leave. And I remember thinking, that this is not going to be how my story ends. This is not going to be how my life goes. There is more to this story than to this point. This past Christmas was 3 years that I've spent sober. And every day is still a constant battle. I tell you all this because I want to be open and honest with you. I tell you all this because I want you to know that I know what it's like not to have any hope. To feel as if you're not good enough. To feel as if you're the least deserving in your Father's house. And I know what it feels like, that there's no way God can use you because of what you've done. And I imagine Gideon felt that same way. I imagine Gideon just sitting down and being confused and suspicious on God's call for his life. But Gideon had to decide if what he knew about God was real. I like to refer to this moment as a crisis of belief. A moment to where you have to decide if what you know about God is real and you trust he is who he says he is or not. And what happens next reveals what Gideon truly believed God can do. Gideon says yes to God's call. If you keep reading through Judges, you'll see that God takes Gideon on this spiritual journey of smaller steps to eventually get to that grand step of saving Israel. And Gideon eventually does, with God's help, save Israel from the Midianites. God told Gideon that he will be there with him through it all. And Gideon had to have faith in that. And Gideon, who had this image of himself that he was weak and that he was the least in his father's house, God calls him a mighty man of valor before anything even happens. Do you see how faithful God is in that? Gideon had this image of himself that wasn't true, and God saw something completely different. Gideon would use many words to describe himself, but man of valor would not be one of them. But God saw something different. Do you see how faithful he is in that? Does this mean that Gideon never questioned God again? Absolutely not. He's human. We're human. Gideon constantly asked God to show him signs that he was doing the right thing and to prove to him that he was going to be with him. I'm also guilty of this. I constantly ask God to show me signs that I'm doing the right thing, that this is what you want, and to show me that you're going to be with me. Friends, I want to tell you something, and I'm telling it to you because I'm telling it to myself. The only sign me and you will ever need is God already gave us when he died on that cross. Like Gideon, I believe for the longest time that there's no way that God can use me because of my past and because of what I've done and the trouble and the pain that I've caused. But I know that's a lie. God can use anyone to serve in his kingdom, and by his grace, we get to live and have an intimate relationship with him. Do you see how faithful he is in that? God has a plan for our lives. He had one for Gideon to save Israel. He has one for me. And I can't stand up here and tell you today that I know what that plan is, because that would be a lie. And that call that God led on my life 15 years ago or so has led me here with the opportunity to speak to you as a living testament to how faithful our God is. And he has one for you. But Chad, it's not the right time for me. I have this or that going on, or yeah, that may be your background, that may be your experience, but you don't know what I've done. You don't know the hurt that I've caused. You don't know the pain that I've caused. There's no way that God can use me. And you're right. I don't know your pain, and I don't know your background, and I don't know your experiences, but God does. And he took that pain, and he took that hurt, and he took that hate, and he took my addiction, and he took that self-doubt, and he washed it away with the blood of the cross. Do you see how faithful he is in that? God longs for you to hear the words that he's telling you, that he's going to be with you, and that you can have faith, because he's proven how faithful he is. So what's next? In a couple of days, it's going to be New Year's, and I want to lay out a challenge to you. The band's going to make their way back up here as we enter into a time of worship, and I want you to think about these two questions. One, what is God calling you to do? Maybe God's calling you to get more involved here at the chapel. Maybe God's calling you to serve or to volunteer in some capacity. Maybe God's calling you to branch out in your workplace or branch out in your career. Or maybe God is just simply calling you to tell you that he wants a relationship with you. I don't know what that call is for your life. That's for you and him to figure out. But I challenge you to lean into that yes. I challenge you to be obedient, because you can be. The second question is going to be, what are you going to do about it? The size of the call isn't important, so I don't want you to hear that if you don't hear this grand assignment from God, then you must be doing something wrong. That's not it. I'm simply asking you to be obedient, whatever that call is. Now, as the call gets bigger, so is the faith that's required. Like Gideon had a whole bunch of faith to go save Israel from the Midianites, but God was with him. Like me, I had to have a whole lot of faith to get up here and to be vulnerable with you and to share a part of my story that I'm really not proud of. But I know that God is with me in this place and he's with me outside of this place. And when you come to that moment where you have to decide if God is who he says he is and you trust and believe that or not, what you do next reveals what you truly believe God can do. And I challenge you to lean into that yes, to lean into that obedience, and to have the faith, because he is faithful.